I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to our Insider Insight Show. I'm honored to have back with me someone I consider a very dear friend and someone who has been a freedom fighter, fighting not just for his freedom, not just for his family's freedom, but for every American's freedom for decades. He is one of the most courageous people I know. He is also one, if not the most honest person I know. Kirk Wiebe has a reputation of telling you what you need to know. And it might not be what you want to hear, but it's what you need to know. And you can always count on it being the truth. A little background on those of you not familiar with Kirk. He is a retired National Security Agency whistleblower who worked at the agency for over 32 years. During his tenure there, Kirk received the Director CIA's Meritorious Unit Award and the NSA's Meritorious Civilian Service Award, that agency's second highest distinction for work against foreign strategic weapons systems. Kirk, together with colleagues Bill Binney, Diane Rourke, and Ed Loomis, blew the whistle on NSA mismanagement and waste of billions of dollars in a complaint to the Department of Defense Inspector General. Unable to stay at the NSA any longer, in good conscience, Kirk, along with colleagues Bill Binney and Ed Loomis, retired in October of 2001. They were, if you will, the original whistleblowers. We hear about whistleblowers all the time. About the real number one whistle. We hear about Julian Assange. We hear about Edward Snowden, if you will. We hear about the long-term players, the first ones to step forward, really, when it comes to whistleblowing, were Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe and Ed Loomis. Kirk has made several key public disclosures regarding NSA's massive surveillance program subverting the U.S. Constitution, which is why Kirk is not a favorite of the political elite, of the deep state, of the New World Order crowd, whatever you want to call them. He is an American hero. I am honored to have back with me Kirk Wiebe. Kirk, welcome back to the Insider Insight Show.
Dave, thank you. It's a pleasure. A distinct pleasure to be with you.
So, Kirk, I mentioned in your introduction that as of 2001, you felt that in good conscience, you could no longer stay at the NSA. Now, I know there are things that you cannot speak about in public, but those that you can speak about, what were the straws that broke the camel's back where Kirk Wiebe said, look, I'm here over 30 years. I can't take this anymore. I'm not going to be a part of this.
Well, Dave, it wasn't it wasn't one thing. It was a whole series of things that I think I could capture by saying the realization that agendas at the highest floors of NSA and downtown and Congress are much different than the little worker doing the hard work, facing the technical issues, trying to make breakthroughs. Our view of the world is different. And we're often not privy to what the true agendas of senior management are. They're often hidden because they're not always mission related. You know, I'm old fashioned. I go to work. I believe there's a mission. In the case of NSA, it's the defense and security of the United States. From an electronic viewpoint, communications, data. We don't carry guns at NSA. And we're not spooks in that sense. But we're spooks when it comes to data. So our job is to get data, find it somewhere that we believe is believable and relevant to the intelligence question, and collect it, process it in a form that humans can digest and understand, and then take the nuggets and publish them to the right parts of the security apparatus of the United States, whether it be the Pentagon and the armed forces, et cetera, to protect the nation and make sure we're ready, that we have no surprises. And in that sense, it's a lot like journalism, isn't it? You have a question,
Mm-hmm.
You have to find data.
Mm-hmm.
You process the data, you filter it, whatever, and you publish it. It's really very similar.
Now, Kirk, when you stepped out with several colleagues and said, I'm out of here, and you became a whistleblower, there were many people who not only condemned you for being a whistleblower, for being a patriot, but in fact, you and your colleagues had a lot of heat generated your way. I believe at the time Robert Mueller was the director of the FBI. He actually sent some representatives to your home, didn't he?
Yeah, it took him a while to do it, which to me, in other words, we left, you're right, in 2001, and we got raided by the FBI in 2007, July 26th, a date that will live in infamy for those of us who went through it. But isn't it curious that if we were such big threats to security that it took them 6 years to get to us? Well, that tells you a lot about the true agenda. Mm-hmm. The true agenda was to send a message to other people to keep quiet. Mm-hmm. Don't be a whistleblower. That's what it was all about. And to give us a punch in the face, which comes in the form of 12 agents going through your house, looking through everything they want to look at while you sit on the porch, being guarded by an agent for 7 hours or more as they rummage through everything and take what they want to take and drive off in their white vans. So, yeah, we were not enemies of the state. We were truth tellers, and that's how they treated truth tellers.
And Kirk, in addition, did they try legally to threaten you as far as we're going to take you to court? In addition to the FBI doing this search party through your home, rummaging through your home for 7 hours, did they ever threaten litigation against you or any of your fellow patriots?
Yeah, Bill and I, when this happened, decided to go halvesies on legal representation because we knew a favorite tactic of the government is to threaten you, make you feel threatened so that you hire a lawyer and empty your life savings into the lawyer's pockets. So what Bill and I did was try to mitigate some of that impact by, first of all, hiring the same lawyer and going together. And that brings the advantage of us triggering our minds and memories about things as you go through, because the lawyer's got to understand the context and all of that. And we did that. And the lawyer that we had was a former federal prosecutor in Baltimore. And he told us that he thought just as soon as the new administration came in, meaning Obama, this would all go away. Well, it didn't.
Shocking.
Obama came in.
Shocking.
And one could argue it actually
got worse.
He redoubled. Yeah, it got worse. So in February 2010, we had an interesting overture from the FBI. They wanted to sit down with Bill and me separately because by that time they had become aware of a guy named Thomas Drake. And they were looking to up the charges on Tom Drake, get as much as they could.
Sure.
Somewhere in all of this, they decided Drake is the guy we really want to go after legally because, after all, he's the one that talked to the press, Shaban Gorman, and the article that appeared in the Baltimore Sun around 2005, 2006 timeframe. So we met with them, and to be honest with you, we had met with Tom Drake after we were raided and told him we were raided. And Tom at that point became worried that he'd be raided. Well, he was. It took 3 more months to happen, but he was raided. But what the FBI wanted to know was, did Thomas Drake tell you anything about classified information or things that he had taken or what? I said, and we said, absolutely not. Thomas Drake's a whistleblower. He's not trying to spy on NSA. He's trying to report wrongdoing. And I guess the FBI couldn't understand.
Right. It was beyond their, right? Beyond their comprehension, right? No. Exactly. Oh, no. Why would anyone do that?
Exactly. And the FBI in their letter to us said, if you do testify and you're honest, we will give you immunity from any charges in this matter. So we have letters of immunity, Bill and I do, with the caveat that we're honest. Well, we had no problem being honest. Right. There was nothing to report on Thomas Drake other than he's a patriot. So thank goodness we got our letters and we were left alone. But the FBI still had our property. They had taken printers, digital phones, computers, and I had 6 of them because I like to tinker with computers and build them, and I had different ones outfitted with different types of hardware so I could do different things, like take voice off of the old cassette tapes and convert it to digital. Mm-hmm. You can hire somebody to do that kind of stuff. But as formats change over time, you end up with all this data that if you don't convert it, you'll never be able to listen to it.
It's useless, right?
Yeah, it's useless. So anyway, it was a hobby of mine, and I wanted to learn how computers were put together. And believe it or not, it's easy. It really is. It's not rocket science. So anyway, they took all that, and they took Loomis's, and they took Diane Rourke's, and so we said, there's no crime. So why do they get to keep this?
Right.
And the FBI is in the habit of keeping people's stuff from these kind of raids.
Right.
So we said, we're going to court. Right. And we're not going to waste money on a lawyer because we know this problem as well as any lawyer does. And not only that, we had heard that if you go pro se, it's Latin, pro se, that means nobody's representing you except yourself. The court is somewhat kind because they know you're not a trained lawyer.
Right.
And so you get a little built-in respect and slack for having the courage to come forward without an attorney. And if you do a reasonable job of presenting the facts, they're going to help you get through this. So let me just answer and hang this up because it's nobody that I know.
Well, it might be the FBI.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we all get robocalls. So anyway, we went pro se. We each presented testimony. The senior judge overseeing this case put it in the hands of a magistrate judge. And she was quite good, actually. And after several testimonies and then a lot of phone discussions with the magistrate and working with the government's attorney, all of our stuff was ordered returned under a 41G. That's the umbrella of the type case. It's property. It's property oriented. Return of personal property. Basically, we got everything back.
So they didn't pull the old, like they did with General Flynn's 302, or like they did with the Woods file on Carter Page, or they didn't pull the old, we can't find it.
That's right.
They had it, and they gave it back. And
it would have been very hard for them. Remember, we had the advantage of having 4 or 5 people.
Right.
General Flynn only had himself.
Right.
And it really helps when there's more than one player. Harder for the FBI to control.
Right.
And much of the evidence that you would have used would have been on our computers anyway. It's emails, communications.
Right.
And that, by the way, is where they got on to Thomas Drake. They saw emails on our computers with Tom Drake. And so they followed that lead to go after him. And then the newspaper article in the Baltimore Sun pushed him over the edge, and they decided to make Tom the example. So anyway, we never heard anything after that. It took about a half a year to get all of our equipment back physically, but I actually had an FBI agent show a sign of, I don't know what to call it, respect to me, because she drove my stuff to my house here. I did not have to drive down to the Beltway area of Washington, D.C. to pick up my computers and things. She delivered them. And I could just tell the way she was talking that she had felt bad that this had even happened to us. But she couldn't say it officially.
No, not if she didn't want to get demoted.
Right. So I think these low-level,
right,
working level, line level, I don't want to say low because some of these people...
It's line, yeah.
They're extraordinary people. But she just wanted to send that message.
Yeah.
And I thought that was wonderful. Yeah. So anyway, that got over with, and we have a badge of distinction now of having been raided by the United States government.
And never received, obviously, any apologies from Robert Mueller or Comey, who then succeeded him, about, we're sorry, we essentially violated your rights.
Exactly.
We never any, just silence.
Exactly.
So let's go. When you came forward, and Bill and Ed Loomis and Diane Rohr came forward, there were a lot of folks that said, well, they're kind of, I don't know, they're talking about what the NSA's been doing and how they've been snooping into people's phone calls and emails and financial transactions without warrants, without. But there must have been, and it took too long, Kirk, granted, way too long. But as early as 2015, the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit held in a case ACLU versus Clapper that the national security agencies, your former, if you want to call it, alma mater, the national security agency's mass telephone metadata collection program, which had been in place for well over a decade or more, according to the report, was not authorized by Section 215 of the Patriot Act. And in fact, the circuit court ruled that all you had spoken about, the circuit court ruled that what the NSA was doing was illegal. Now, Kirk, did anyone in power in 2015, so that would still be the Obama administration, get in touch with you and say, hey, Kirk Wiebe, you know how you came forward in 2001, you gave us a 14-year heads up about this illegal activity? Thank you very much for doing it. Did anyone ever come to you and say that, Kirk?
No, one of the most heartbreaking things that we came to realize over time was that nobody seemed to care. Oh, wow. Nobody.
Wow.
And I mean, could somebody in Congress have invited us in just to talk in their office about this and to get to the truth? There was no stomach for it. And so I gave them the benefit of the doubt. I believed that NSA was using techno lingo to snow the understanding of Congress. In other words, they did not really want Congress to know why they were doing what they were doing from a implementation perspective, because the more that they divulged, the more the Congress would probably ask questions and say, why are you doing? And that's, Dave, that's all Bill and I wanted to do, was educate Congress that this was totally unnecessary. The way they were doing this and putting all these innocent people's data in a database. I don't care if it's metadata content. It is not necessary to do it.
So 2001, when you came forward, to 2015, when this decision occurred, to 2020, congressmen have not come to Kirk Wiebe or Bill Binney or Ed Loomis or Diane Rohr and said, okay, all right. I didn't want to believe this at the time when you came forward in 2001, but now we got a circuit court ruling, and we're about to talk about one that just occurred in the Ninth Circuit Court that said, that again reinforced what the courageous whistleblowers had come forward about. A congressman, or a senator, right? I mean, there are now hundreds and hundreds with elections and re-elect, over this time, hundreds of congressmen and senators. they've never said, hey, can you guys come in here and tell us exactly what we need to know and what we're not being told, and why you had the, what brought you to the level in 2001 of coming forward. There's nobody that's, for example, the discussion we've already had today, there's never been a congressman that's had that discussion with you before. Is that true?
True.
That's sick.
It is sick. And it made us realize that this thing we today call the deep state is far more widespread, and it's not any one party. It affects people in both parties.
Right.
And obviously, this black box and this surveillance weapon, because I'm now going to call it a weapon, isn't just to protect the United States from attack from enemies. It is to be used politically in any way those in power want to do it. And I would tell you, part of the reason we're seeing Durham and Barr sandbag this thing is that issue. They are trying to figure out how to get someone to blame, but also not give away the keys to the kingdom and threaten the surveillance process, which is completely illegal under the Constitution. And they don't want it in the public forum for debate. The American people never got a vote. Mm-mm. And Congress is techno-snowed. I'm going to use that term. And so it believes that a handshake and a wink is good enough. And we now know it's so easy to hijack this weapon and use it against our own people. It is the biggest threat to this nation, bar none. And I'm going to put China and Russia in that bin as well. Much worse threat internally.
So the frustration the American people have been finding over the past several, let's say, years, that this information is not coming forward fast enough, if you will, from Durham and Barr, because, and this is, I've never heard anybody speak about this, what you just said, Kirk, is that they know what the heck happened. They know the illegality of what happened. And it's really centered, Admiral Lyons said to me, he passed in December 2018. He kept saying to me, Dave, this is what he would say, Kirk, Dave, the key to the coup, the key to General Flynn's freedom, the key to the future of our country is outing what happened with the illegal surveillance program. In particular, what he said was with the hammer, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it comes down to that it's the illegal surveillance that's the key to this whole mess. And the reason why Durham and Barr haven't come forward is because if they do come forward and say, okay, here it is, here's the illegal surveillance, not just at the NSA, but across the board, that's been occurring of American citizens, that the concern is that you think there's turmoil in the country now when every American finds out that every American was on the hook, that all heck's going to break loose.
Absolutely. It's a bombshell, and they know it. It's a landmine, and they're trying to tiptoe around it.
Yeah. And in the process, Kirk, they're making it worse by tiptoeing around it.
They are. If I could make one phone call to the Oval Office and ask Donald Trump one favor on behalf of the American people, that would mean more than just about anything else he could do as president. It would be to blow this thing wide open and to fix it by implementing another approach to data exploitation that meets the spirit and the intent of the judiciary under the Constitution of the United States. And David, it isn't rocket science to do it.
Right. And many people, Kirk, say that is not possible. But in fact, it is possible. The people that are saying it's impossible to do that are the very people that want this same criminal system to be left in place.
Absolutely, Red.
It's possible. You can surveil the bad guys and not violate the rights of innocent Americans.
Exactly.
So that brings us to this decision that was made in early September of this year, 2020. Court rules NSA phone snooping illegal after a 7-year delay. This from Josh Gerstein. The National Security Agency's program that swept up details on billions of Americans' phone calls was illegal and possibly unconstitutional, stated by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on September 2nd, 2020. Now, Kirk, this is now 19 years after you and Bill Binney and Ed Loomis and Diane Rourke came forward. 19 years, Kirk. And you know what, Kirk? The mention of that decision, you are hard-pressed to find a footnote of that decision in the bought-off lamestream fake media.
Yeah, I believe it.
I have talked to countless people and said, are you aware of the decision that came through the Ninth Circuit, no less, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on September 2nd? And people go, that didn't happen. Oh, yeah, it did.
Yeah, it did.
So now, Kirk, here's the other issue I want to get into, because you have been very upfront about this, as have a number of other people. There are many people that say, okay, the NSA has done really bad things on the criminal front when it comes to surveillance and illegal surveillance. Okay. But that's where it starts and that's where it stops. That there's no other part of the United States government, and CIA, FBI, State Department, Treasury Department, Homeland Security, IRS, the entire intelligence community, all 17. It was only the NSA that was involved in this illegal surveillance. That's what people are saying. And what we have put forward on this platform numerous times is that, yeah, it happened at the NSA, but it also happened at many other entities, including the Defense Department and you name the branch of the military and the CIA and the FBI and the State Department, the Treasury Department. Now, Kirk, somebody's right on that and somebody's wrong on this. What's the real answer?
The real answer is fairly simple. The United States intelligence budget, from a congressional budgeting perspective, is chopped into pieces based on different kinds of programs and who owns them. For example, in NSA's case, NSA is an asset of the Pentagon. Mm-hmm. It has a .mil address.
Fact.
And a .gov. That's their open face, but it has a .mil address. Mm-hmm. You can reach the director of NSA through a .mil email.
True.
I really don't know as I could guess what it is.
Right.
But in any case, it's a military asset, and it was put together as a result of World War II by Truman and follow-ons to solve the problem of independent intelligence assets like the Navy, the Army, the Army Air Corps, the Marines. And the fact that they didn't share that data, it was because it was generally thought to be supportive of local combat operations for that force at any given time. People said, well, wait a minute, there's aspects of the air war that impact the infantry war. So we need a better correlation of information across the services. And so they created something called NSA, the three letters everybody's heard. But often people don't understand the second part of NSA's name, and that is NSA / Central Security Service, CSS. That's the military overlap component designed to coordinate across all forces. Now, people say, well, what's DIA do? Well, DIA doesn't collect information. It collects intelligence reports coming out of the other agencies that might address a topic of interest to the military from not a data collection, but the actual reporting of the information. So it's a filter, so to speak, and another correlation level. Now, some of these organizational constructs, the reasons we have so many agencies, is a lack of understanding that they all start with the same OR, data. They all begin with data at some level. So, because they address different problems, subjects, think of it as a library. You go in, you look up, and even the library is organized by subject, or you can look at it by author, but I want to key on subject matter for the time being. So if you want to see physics, you're probably going to find all the physics books in one area. You're not going to find them mixed in with history and this and that and so forth. So the communities organize that same way by authorities and by subject matter. In this day and age, you can correlate across all data simply using modern IT capabilities. So what the future needs to look like, and I think General Flynn shares this vision, is a common government IC intelligence community solution, where the processes are leveraging data, correlating it ahead of time. You don't have to do it when it's already reported. Right. In fact, you should do your analysis with the best knowledge from across the board before you make any pronouncements and publish. It's like you, as a journalist, you'd like to get all your I's and T's taken care of before you go on your show.
Absolutely.
So that someone doesn't say, well, Dave, didn't you know that? Oh, my goodness, I didn't do my homework. Well, it's the same idea. If we can make it part of the same processing system and then deliver the answers, we'll have better, more comprehensive, and a greater variety of perspectives, because you can bring in pictures, videos, print, and do a real multimedia bang-up job of delivering intel. So that was a little bit of a departure, Dave, from what your question was, but it's part of the issue. Here we have NSA violating the law knowingly. They'll tell you they're not, but it's known. And you cannot cover a crime using classification, but it's been hiding behind classification forever.
That's right.
And I would tell you, in my learned estimation, NSA has operated unconstitutionally for about 70% of its existence since it was formed in the late 40s, early 50s. And that's why we had the Church Commission and the two intelligence communities. We're not going to committees. We're not going to repeat all that. But NSA cheats, and they'll say, "Oh, we're doing it for the nation." Well, don't you think that is a dangerous, slippery slope that has now come to fruition when we're turning it on our own people to subvert a duly elected president? My God, it doesn't get any worse than that.
And Kirk, you have come on this platform in the past and have spoken about other agencies also being involved in illegal surveillance activities in so-called what are called parallel platforms.
Yes, and I wanted to return to that point. So we have data sources under these different budgeted programs across the intelligence community. NSA has its programs. Some of those involve data collection and systems that point to certain geopolitical areas, again, to get the data that's believed to be needed, that's relevant to answering an intelligence question, whatever it may be. It could be military, could be economic, could be whatever. And CIA, as well as the military services, have budgets by which they can build SIG systems, signals intelligence, which means find data, collect it, process it, analyze it, and report it. So this is nothing new. This has been going on for years and years and years. So it's known that CIA does this. Now, regarding the hammer, we are instructed by Ace Lyons and Tom McInerney and others that you have had on your programs that this capability this hammer program began as an authorized NSA asset to fight the war on terror.
Foreign surveillance.
Foreign surveillance, absolutely. Nothing to do with Americans.
No.
Except to benefit Americans.
Right. Protect.
So, and at some point, and I'm not sure we know the exact year and month, but at some point early in the 2000s to mid 2000s, James Clapper, who has had a career within the Pentagon and then up through the CIA and then these different places, a DNI. He and Brennan, a career CIA guy who was in key positions, including the Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, that he helped put together, orchestrated either a copying or a transfer of this technical capability. And I won't even say to the CIA, because that sounds formal. It sounds like it's an authorized action. They commandeered a copy of it, hid it, and operated it for what we believe are nefarious reasons, a lot of those targets being American firms and entities, some foreign as well. But we believe it was done to feed the deep state in some capacity. We're informed that there may be two of them. Now, all I'm telling you is for Clapper or Brennan to be able to do that would be fairly easy. NSA cooperates with the CIA in the world of SIGINT and has for decades. It makes sense. You cooperate so that you also don't duplicate. That would be wasteful. But it's more about cooperation. And so the idea of this happening is not hard to swallow at all. At all. What is hard to swallow is the illegal application of it on unauthorized targets outside of any formal okay process or whatever. As bad and as weak as I believe the FISA process is to authorize wiretaps on Americans, I think this program was without any bounds or constraints whatsoever.
So there was a book recently written called "The Hammer is the Key to the Coup," written by investigative journalists Mary Fanning and Alan Jones. And you wrote an introduction. Do I have your permission to read that brief introduction you wrote?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Direct quote: "We could very well lose the nation we have built over the past 244 years," end quote. When Bill Binney and I first heard of Dennis Montgomery, this is the person who was who had developed the hammer, who had invented. I don't know if you want to say invented, but he's the guy who invented it. I mean, he's developed it.
Yeah.
When Bill Binney and I first heard of Dennis Montgomery, we were led to believe he was a scoundrel, a drunkard, and a person who worshipped at the altar of the almighty dollar. We had been, quote, conned, end quote, by a self-declared police detective by the name of Zullo, a messenger sent by the deep state to deceive us. At that point, Bill and I believed Zullo's narrative to be largely true. 3 years later, having been much better informed by the facts surrounding Dennis Montgomery, we found ourselves at the opposite impression. In other words, we had come to believe that Dennis Montgomery was telling the truth about the existence of a powerful, unauthorized, and misappropriated technical capability born in the United States intelligence community, but heisted to do the work of the corrupt, those intent on overthrowing the Trump presidency and the very core of our constitutional republic. Unfortunately, the government has been slow to understand the severity of the corruption underlying deep state surveillance activities. If the United States Department of Justice does not quickly and fully debrief Mr. Montgomery and assess the depth and breadth of the damage caused by this powerful spy machine called the Hammer, we could very well lose the nation we have built over the past 244 years. J. Kirk Wiebe, former National Security Agency senior analyst.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you read them, because when you author something like that, time goes by and you're not quite exactly sure of the words, but the thrust, the impact of that is spot on. And I'll go to my grave saying it is spot on.
You know, Kirk, you came on this platform along with your friend Bill Binney over a year ago and spoke about the fact that that the two of you, actually, this is the first time I believe it had been said in public, this is in June of 2019, that the two of you had been involved in what's called parallel platforms, other surveillance programs outside of the NSA. Prior to that, there was this cacophony, this chorus of people with, I would say, limited to no functional knowledge when it comes to IT, information technology, and surveillance platforms, who said that parallel platforms, these other surveillance systems, of only one of which is the hammer, that the parallel platforms did not exist. But do you stand behind your statement a year ago, when you came forward and said, we worked on these parallel platforms?
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. I mean, it was as common a task on any given day at NSA to receive data collected by parallel platforms. And in fact, those will oftentimes, Dave, had an extra level of security protection, what they call a compartmented clearance. Means in order to access that, you had to have a demonstrated need to know. You couldn't just know it and browse something and find it. You would have to know that to do your job.
So many times, Kirk, when people come forward as whistleblowers, the goal is to, if you will, not go after the message that the whistleblowers are delivering, but to assassinate a character, but also even if it takes it potentially death threats against the whistleblower, to launch into slander, libel, defamation, to denigrate that whistleblower. You experienced this. Your colleagues experienced this. Dennis Montgomery experienced this. And over a year ago, I asked you about your assessment of Dennis Montgomery, because the character assassination that has been directed at him has been enormous. And I don't think if there's a word above enormous, of greater magnitude, whatever it is. But here's what you wrote to me. Dave, all the documents you sent to the effect that Dennis Montgomery was involved in developing surveillance methods for the United States government that the latter entity believed would pose grave danger to the national security if divulged. In reviewing them, I did not see anything questionable or that would indict what Dennis has said. Best, Kirk. Kirk, do you still stand behind that?
Oh, 1,000%, Dave.
Now, Kirk, you've spoken to Dennis Montgomery.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Is he real?
Oh, he's real.
There are people that say that, well, he's in the shadows and he's not a real guy. Well, Kirk, tell me if I'm wrong, but 2006, 2007, John Negroponte, the then director of the National Intelligence Service, invoked on him what's called, which is, if you will, the gag order of all gag orders, that being the state secrets privilege, where if you speak out of turn, you go to Leavenworth.
Absolutely right.
Do they normally hit somebody with a state secrets privilege who it doesn't have the goods?
No, they don't. They don't waste their time with it. It's such a significant action that everyone, including the person levying the gag order, in this case Negroponte, the first director of national intelligence, but the judges themselves who have to pass on it, they themselves take it very, very seriously. Do they usually give the nod for national security if that's what's being claimed by the government? Yes, they do. There's a bias there. But the point of it is, just to make that happen is extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't happen very often. And it told Bill and me that I don't know exactly what Dennis built. I haven't seen it. He's never told me exactly how it works. But I can tell you the government felt it was of such importance that they couldn't risk any inkling of its functionality or design to be leaked or accidentally disclosed in any kind of a legal proceeding or otherwise that Dennis Montgomery might find himself in. It's severe.
And you've spoken to him a number of times.
Yes.
Kirk, you've been around the block. You've been doing this for decades. You can smell a rat. You can smell if somebody's a fraud.
Yep.
Is he legit?
He's legit. He's totally legit. In fact,
I mean, you last spoke to him. Tell me if I'm wrong. Last time you spoke to him was within the past week.
Yeah. I have spoken to him within the past week. I have. He's a gentleman. He's honest. He's worried for the nation. He has information that would be so helpful to the good people in government, especially the ones we hold in esteem, such as the president, the Department of Justice, key members in Congress, not all members, because I have a lot of disdain for many of these people.
Yeah, you and me both.
But trust and honor and integrity are so important in these matters, and it's lacking on the part of so many that claim to be in the know and have clearances and have authorities. But Dennis is one of those people at the truly knowledgeable level of what's going on, how the system works, how it was used, how it's being used, that for the government not to leverage what he knows in the fight against the deep state and against corruption and in defense of the Constitution is absolutely unfathomable. I'm frustrated to the point where I can't process it. It's just unbelievable. Dennis Montgomery is a national asset who needs to be brought forth in this battle against corruption, and it needs to happen yesterday.
You know, Kirk, in the sports world, there are game changers, but then there are game enders. There are very few game enders in the world. People like yourself, people like Bill Binney, people like Ed Loomis, people like Dennis Montgomery are game enders. And that's what the deep state fears the most.
Yeah, I guess you're right about that.
And frankly, another game ender is General Flynn, which is why they put him through the, not prosecution, through the persecution he has been through. You know, Kirk, one of the gutsiest people in D.C. in at least the past couple years, in addition to Donald Trump and General Flynn, has been this acting director of national intelligence, Rick Grinnell, who's the former ambassador to Germany. You know, he was there for a very short period of time, but he disclosed a tremendous amount of information. And the key thing he disclosed as it relates to General Flynn is he, after no one else, Dan Coates, the director of national intelligence for years, would not release the transcripts of that famed phone call between the ambassador of Russia, Kislyak, and General Flynn. Rick Grinnell did that. And those transcripts showed that General Flynn did not lie. But here's the other interesting thing. And going out the door, Rick Grinnell made the following statement about the transcripts, about those phone calls. He said, those transcripts and how they were obtained, the surveillance, here's the direct quote, was not a work product of the intelligence community. In other words, Kirk, those transcripts, that phone call that was surveilled, was not surveilled by the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, the Defense Department, the State Department, the Treasury Department. He said it right then and there. It was illegal surveillance that was done outside of the intelligence community, which means, folks, they got it. Brennan and Clapper and Obama got it through the hammer.
The hammer. Yeah, exactly.
Which interesting, General Flynn's brother, Jack, tweeted recently, personally, I feel the whole Flynn family was monitored during Crossfire Razor, the investigation of General Flynn, by the FBI. Personally, I feel the whole Flynn family was monitored during Crossfire Razor by the FBI. And I tweeted back to Jack, you bet. General Flynn, the Flynn family were hammered by Obama, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, Mueller's illegal surveillance platform long before the criminals want you to know. And then Sidney Powell retweeted that. In fact, on 2 occasions on network TV that I'm aware of, Sidney Powell spoke about the hammer.
Exactly.
So, Kirk, where do we go from here? We are less than 2 months from an election. And many of us are very worried.
Yeah, and you should be. We're late in the ball game. It shouldn't have taken this long for Barr and Durham to at least begin to call witnesses and people into the grand jury, which is required in this situation. And I don't know if any of that's happened. It's not being reported if it is, but we're late in the ball game. There should be something on the table, something visible. The American people know terrible wrongs have been done. It's a favorite tactic to let the concern die out with time. And then people forget. And then they throw up their hands and say, well, it's government. What are you going to do? We need to have something on the table that points to facts and justice before the election. People deserve that. The American people deserve that. The heck with all this classified stuff. We're talking about the existence of the nation. You know, it's just so fundamental. But in the meantime, we do what you're doing. Get the word out. And the people who are listening, they need to tell their neighbor, their friend, the guys they drink with, the guys they work with, the gals too. I'm not being sexist. But get the word out. And if they need to, point them to your podcast, your website. And I'm not being gratuitous in saying that. I mean it. There is knowledge. We're talking about information that you can leverage and use as you think about how these things affect your daily lives and threaten them. The threat is worse than any we've ever faced.
Kirk, I want to end our interview on an issue that many people believe is conspiracy theory, let's say. As I mentioned earlier in this interview, whistleblowers in particular are targeted on many different planes. They are targeted by trying to demean them, trying to ruin them reputation-wise. They should go after them financially. They go after them psychologically. They go after them on a myriad of fronts to denigrate whistleblowers. But there's been a lot of talk about directed energy weapons. And many people believe, well, that's just conspiracy theory. You know, Kirk, you are a scientist. I was trained as a scientist as well. And when you start to speak about directed energy weapons, people believe that this is just, as I said, conspiracy theory. In fact, Kirk, there is actual evidence that shows that directed energy weapons do indeed exist and are in fact being used. Is that a false statement?
No, it's a true statement. Over the last 5 years, I would say, Bill Binney and I have been increasingly exposed to the world of targeted individuals. Now, when I say TI, targeted individuals, these are people who, for whatever reason, believe they are the victims of these kinds of weapons or gang stalking and the like. There's various ways you can target someone. But let's focus for a minute on directed energy weapons. The U.S. Marine Corps right now has an equipped personnel carrier with a large square or mostly square antenna on it, maybe 5 feet by 6 feet in size, that can crowd control, for example. Sure. And it does this by using a extremely high frequency signal, radio frequency energy, beamed, and I say beam because the antenna configuration is a beam. It's not going everywhere. It's beamed in a certain direction, and you can tilt it and turn it at people with sufficient energy to penetrate skin to about 1/64th of an inch. which is sufficient to cause pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the weapon is trying to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
not trying to fry your body. It's trying to create enough pain to make it unpleasant so that you stop coming forward.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a crowd control weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's non-lethal is the point.
Mm-hmm.
However, excuse me, this is a dentist, so I have to let it ring. I don't need to take it. Somebody else. But should I just pause until this thing stops?
Okay.
You won't?
That wasn't long.
No, that was somebody got it.
Okay.
Okay. So the issue is it's non-lethal. Now, the difference between non-lethal and lethal is often the turn of a knob.
Mm.
Because when you use these kinds of weapons, to be non-lethal means the energy is being transmitted at a frequency that tends to be not lethal. If you wanted to be lethal, you wouldn't use 95 gigahertz.
Right.
You have to use 300 megahertz
Mm-hmm.
because those waves penetrate
Mm-hmm.
much deeper than a 64th of an inch.
Mm-hmm.
So there's physics involved here, and you can control these variables to get the outcome you like. But I am certain that this same technology can be used to fry people on the battlefield. I mean, kill them.
Great.
Yeah, or disable them at least at a minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason I bring this up is, yes, you're right, they exist. But the other factor is this. There are many TIs in the world, globally, who will
targeted individuals.
Yeah, targeted individuals who'll say, I am being affected by satellites up in the sky, 20,000 kilometers up. I want those people to know, please don't make claims that you don't understand. And I'm not being specious in this. What I'm trying to say is there's physics involving frequency, distance from target, power level.
Mm-hmm.
These variables can be modulated, but there's a point where the physics won't allow something to happen. For example, there are people to say, well, you can use a laser in space and burn somebody in a crowd. No, you can't, because that distance, that intervening distance, the
Mm-hmm.
beam doesn't stay narrow enough to select one person.
Right.
So please read, please get informed. You know, I don't know what's affecting you if you're a targeted person, but at least read the basics of physics and involving the transmission of energy, what the big variables are, and then think about that when you make a claim. It's important to have a good discussion, and you'll be much more successful if you do that.
Kirk, I'd like to thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. You have served our country for decades and will serve our country for decades to come. And I thank you because most people would not have had the courage that you've had over all these decades to take on the deep state in hand-to-hand combat on not just an occasional basis, but a daily basis and a 24/7 basis. And I thank you for that.
Well, Dave, thank you for the thank you. But I must say, without an outlet for us to say things and tell the truth, we wouldn't be telling it. There'd be no one to tell it to. So back at you. Thank you.
I thank you. And folks, I thank you for joining us today. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Thank you for your time today. Dream big and dare to fail. And now you have been empowered with information that you need to network to anyone and everyone you know. Because the sooner we network this information, the sooner we end this reign of terror by the deep state. Thanks for joining us today.